So good afternoon, everyone. And firstly, thank you for making the time to join us today. And welcome to the third instalment of our four-part webinar series where we focus on the topic of UK SOX again. Let me start with some very quick introductions. My name is Mark Jackson. I'm the Practice Director for Turnkey's Integrated Risk Management Services in the UK. I'm delighted to be joined today by a couple of our guest speakers, Jack Leach and Paul Squires from Diligent and SailPoint, respectively. Both have extensive experience regarding how to use technology effectively in order to facilitate internal controls transformation. But let me give them both an opportunity to introduce themselves briefly. So Jack, would you like to kick off the introductions?
Yeah, perfect. So firstly, thank you to the Turnkey team for having us here to speak today. As Mark mentioned, my name is Jack Leach and I lead the UK and Ireland go-to-market. And a key part of our focus here at Diligent is primarily focused on UK SOX and the changes to kind of the corporate governance code within the UK market at the moment. For those that are aware of Diligent, we do a lot of work within the risk compliance space, but also you may know us as well from being a provider of entity management, board reporting, and then also key control system and risk management as well. So thank you very much, Mark. I'll hand over to Paul as well to run through a very quick introduction.
Thanks, wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jack. So yes, I'm Paul Squires. I'm the lead identity strategist for the UK and Ireland for SailPoint. Effectively means working with our customers, our prospective customers, internal teams to ultimately try and make sure people are using the technology to the best of its advantage and getting value out of it. Again, SailPoint, for those of you that are not aware of us, we are an identity security solutions provider, effectively understanding around users, their access, and ensuring that users have the right access to the right systems, and of course the way that it impacts on things like controls programs.
Thanks, Paul. So this session will take on a slightly different format than the previous two in the series, as it'll be a panel-based discussion. We've got some questions that I'll put to the guys, which I'm sure will provoke some interesting, insightful conversations. Before I begin with the first question, some quick reminders regarding timing. So the webinar is going to be approximately 20 minutes long. If you have any questions yourselves, then feel free to post them in the chat or the Q&A facilities during the session itself. I'll be monitoring those. If we have any time available at the end, we'll cover those. However, if we're out of time, then we will get back to you after the session itself. So please go ahead and post any questions that you might have on the topics being discussed. Also, just to make you aware that all the sessions in the series will be recorded. They'll be made available to you on demand after the fourth and final webinar is aired, which is tomorrow. And they'll be accessible via the Turnkey website in our key insights section. Okay, so now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, let's start with our first question. So what are the challenges most commonly associated with a controls transformation program? Quite a broad question, but probably a good place to start. Jack, I don't know if you want to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Mark. So I think that if we look at it from a Diligent perspective, we do a lot of work with around kind of continuous controls monitoring. And when we say continuous controls monitoring, we can take perhaps user access as an example. A key risk may be that there may be a joiner or more kind of prevalently a leaver that has still got access to critical business systems a few days after leaving. That is obviously a key risk to an organization. And the test that we're looking to run is to make sure that anyone that has left the organization that is flagged in the kind of the Okta or whatever provider that is being used for single sign-on is then flagged as being left within the HR provider as well and the HR system of choice. Now, we run continuous monitoring programs that would test that control. And the biggest challenge that we work with organizations and typically companies see is very much being able to get access to those data sources. So it's not so much with regards to the transformation project itself, but it's with regards to companies being able to communicate effectively internally with the key stakeholders that own those data sources to be able to actually obtain access to those data sources to ensure that the continuous monitoring program gets off of the ground. So that's a key kind of challenge, Mark, that we see.
Thanks, Jack. Paul, any thoughts yourself on this?
Yeah, I think some similar kind of points around that. The main things that I tend to see is this is a change for many organizations, and particularly those which are coming from a less regulated type of environment. And as a result, this tends to be a lot of new processes that require some kind of implementation. And as Jack was just saying, there's an element of the way that these controls get enforced. So the things I see most commonly as challenges are essentially staffing that, the resourcing, the understanding of how these changes are going to affect the wider business. And typically a communications challenge, as we start to deal with people who are speaking with auditors, for example, not necessarily understanding to the full degree what is required of them. And then as a result, where these things get led by technology parts of the business, over focusing on the technology side of this and forgetting that this is ultimately a process-driven question. So I think those are probably the main things from my perspective that we see as challenges when customers are going through this.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, and from our perspective, from a turnkey perspective, it's probably something very, even sooner on in the process in terms of knowing where to start, and also just as importantly, knowing when to stop as well when it comes to control transformation. So in terms of knowing when to start, it's around the scoping side of things. Which are the relevant process controls based on criticality, materiality, or some other form of measurement, particularly when the current process or controls related documentation is fragmented. There isn't a clear overall picture of what they've got out there, the different risks that they need to be mitigating, or whether those risks are even complete or accurate. And in terms of the when to stop, how many controls is enough? Do we just throw everything at this controls transformation program and hope for the best? Where's that balance that needs to be struck? So we definitely see those as sort of key challenges when discussing controls transformations, that those kind of early stages of their journey when it comes to controls transformation programs. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Let's move on to the next question. So taking on board some of the things just mentioned, how can technology help to solve or mitigate some of those challenges? I don't know who wants to kick off with this one.
So I think for me, the key word is really automation. Again, some of the challenges that I spoke around is that element of having new processes that require an understanding of how to approach these. And if you look at the way that people have tried to solve some of these in the past, lots of manual point in time aspects of solving it. And I think that the key thing that you'd be looking for from a technology perspective is around enabling this to be done in the most cost-effective way, not throwing thousands of people at these types of problems. So having that automation, having that ability to do things in a standardized way without having to repeat on a point-by-point basis. And I think going back to what Jack mentioned before around the idea of continuous controls, having something where at any one stage you can say, yes, we understand what the current landscape is and how we are helping to reduce risk and meet our governance challenges.
Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that we break kind of the technology value statement down into three core areas. That is increased efficiency, which I think Paul has mentioned there, around increasing the efficiency of the program, making sure that people's time is spent adding value rather than kind of chasing paper around an organization. The second is very much in that bucket of risk reduction. So making sure that controls are being managed effectively, that we're getting the collaboration from the business where required, and things are not being missed. So there's obviously the key requirement to make sure that there is a full audit trail behind exactly what's going on within internal control departments. So that risk reduction measure is a key value driver and a key benefit as well. And then finally, the other one that we work long and hard with organizations to obtain is how we can help organizations increase revenue through better programs of internal control. Now, that can be through kind of stopping of leakage within an organization, eradication of fraud, but there are a number of examples of where we've worked with senior finance leaders of where we can use internal control transformation to increase areas of revenue as well. So they're the kind of the three buckets that we would put into the kind of the key benefits.
Great, thank you, guys. If we go on to question number 3, so how can technology help in the longer term? So we're talking about what the initial benefits of a controls transformation program and how technology supports that. But once that program is completed and we're looking into business as usual, how do you get that continued benefits? What are those continued benefits that you see?
Yeah, sorry, Paul, you go, please.
So I was going to follow on really from what I said before around automation being key to all of this. I think that the challenge for most organizations is things are not static, and whatever you're doing for your initial deployment of these technologies, have to start thinking about how this is going to work in future. And certainly from our perspective, looking at the change in users, and Jack touched upon it before around things like the lever processes, making sure that those are done in an effective way. You're also looking at a wider situation here, and the change of businesses themselves, and many of our customers are looking at things like mergers and acquisitions and those types of activities, again pointing to that dynamic nature of business and platforms. I think the key element to all of this is really about having in place a good set of technologies to help adapt and to help drive things like cost savings and that level of automation over the longer term, and to treat this as being I think the phrase business as usual was just used, very much trying to get this as part of an embedded process within organizations. And again, feeding into the fact that this is not a point in time question. You may have to do like audits on a regular basis, but having the technology platform in there will help with that and help make those adjustments in future.
Perfect. I think, Paul, you kind of mentioned one of the key points that I'd like to raise here, that we put in the category of if we look at the 3 lines of defense model, typically a SOX system is owned by the second line finance function. But the longer term benefits once implemented is that if we look at it from an external audit perspective, we look at it from an internal audit perspective, it creates that breadcrumb trail to show the internal auditors that the finance process or the SOX process is being well managed. There's a complete auditable trail. So internal audit have got comfort that those controls are being tested effectively, so that they're not then going to have to be retested by the third line. And similar commentary as well, it gives the external audit team the better confidence or better assurance that that is a well-controlled area of the business. So there can be significant external audit cost savings as well, through showing that this is being done in the long term through a technology. So that would be my key point that Paul touched upon as well.
Okay, thanks, guys. We've actually got a question that's come from the audience, and I did mention about answering questions at the end, but it might be timely to put this in now and get your thoughts on it. So the question is with regards to controls transformation in terms of implementing internal controls framework and building internal controls awareness, especially if funding and resources is limited, i.e. no funding for a GRC tool. I guess my thoughts on that is that obviously you can start small as you like, just having that internal control framework documented is a really good start, outlining what your risks are across your key business processes, what controls you've got in place, whether they be system driven controls from your relevant ERP environment or manual control activities. Just having that collated in some way, shape or form and in a consistent and complete manner across the business. Again, that transparency is a good thing to do. There's still investment required because it's time investment rather than expenditure on tools. But that will only take you so far, because then you don't get that automation benefits that I think we talked about previous. There's not the ability to utilize workflows to put information into people's laps that they can act upon it accordingly and in a timely manner when they're meant to be doing it. That kind of transparency and visibility from reporting perspective and dashboards. The continuous controls monitoring. You can't tap into your source information using spreadsheets. So it can take you a certain way, and it's always a good foundation. And I would always suggest that you have that sort of data information in place before you then look to embark on implementing and migrating that content into a GRC tool. But I think And I guess, I don't know if your thoughts on it, Paul and Jack, in terms of tapping into funding, I guess it's putting the internal controls agenda or top of the agenda or higher up the agenda than what it perhaps is or it should be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that one first, Mark. So I think that if we look at a point in time whereby this is a topic of conversation, it's typically raised during audit committees. And I think that a number of organizations that we work with would raise the business case during audit committee time and add that as an agenda item so that it's solidified in the agenda to be discussed. I think that when we then look at assisting organizations and working with organizations to obtain budget, I would say 50% of companies that we work with don't have budget before working with us as a vendor. And it's part of our job in partnership with organizations to work through what the key pain points of the processes are in doing it manually, and then bringing in a business analyst team that are responsible for finding and sharing and documenting those inefficiencies to work out then how we can solve the pain and how that would convert into a business case. So going back to my point, 50% of cases that we work on, they don't have allocated budget, but it's all about making sure that we understand where the inefficiencies are, as Mark said, around the reporting process, the workflow process, working through with the first line as to where perhaps we can help. And if there is no business case, then it's very unlikely that spend will be approved, is my experience.
Yeah, and something similar from our perspective as well. I think generally we're speaking to people who do have funded projects, but we spend quite a lot of time working with prospective customers to understand where are the wider business values around this. And I think we'll possibly touch upon this later on, but thinking about the added benefits of implementing some of these technology platforms to gain automation, to gain some streamlined processes elsewhere. So alongside the pure controls perspective, think about what this could be doing in the wider business, and we will certainly work with people to put some finances around that and to help build that business case and ultimately look at it from a bigger picture perspective.
Great, thanks, Paul. Time's running away with us, so on to the next question. What are the wider business benefits of carrying out a controls transformation program? Paul, do you want to go back on this one?
Yes, I think having just alluded to that one in the previous answer, it's really starting to think about using that platform in a productive way, and we've touched upon elements of things like the lever processes for organizations, but then applying that to something like the joiners, those mover processes as well, and starting to understand how the automation, how the streamlining of this can start to drive an extra benefit, whether it's from a pure security perspective, and we've got lots of customers who are starting to look at things like zero trust, those security transformation programs as well, or whether it's just from a purely enablement perspective, how quickly could somebody joining the organization get access to the right things to start doing their jobs. So again, we try to think of this in a more holistic way and bringing these elements of a governance perspective, a security and an enablement together, and then start to use that to drive additional benefits for our customers.
Jack, any additional thoughts there?
I think that we've touched upon my thoughts around kind of better alignment across the three lines of defense with regards to business benefits. So I think that in light of time, Mark, there's nothing further I'd add.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, some of the less, I guess, tangible benefits that I see is that one thing it does do is it instills a healthy risk and controls culture, particularly when the business have been heavily involved in the controls transformation program themselves. And so they understand both the what and the why. Why are we doing this? So it becomes sort of naturally embedded as part of their day-to-day activities. It's just something that they do. It becomes good practice, and it instills confidence then in the underlying financial and the non-financial information. And that's what instilling confidence or regaining confidence is something about what this regulation is about. Okay, so let's go on to the fifth and final question. So what considerations should UK businesses be making when selecting the right supporting technology for them? Jack, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so I've got some pretty strong thoughts around this, and I think that in light of the kind of the paper and the results of the paper that came out over the past couple of weeks, we should be positioning the benefits of a stronger system of internal control over financial reporting as being not just something that is driven by the regulation, but it should be that there is huge business benefit to having strengthened internal controls in this area and technology in this area. So being able to convince organizations that that is the case, and senior stakeholders within organizations that that is the case, is exactly the approach that we're taking, and not just using any forthcoming legislation as a stick to make sure that is the case. There is huge business benefit that we've touched upon in strengthening these areas. So that's the kind of the philosophy that Diligent are positioning at the moment.
Yeah, I fully agree. And Paul, any final thoughts from yourself on that?
Yeah, I touched upon this earlier. I think what we see is many people approaching this within the technology areas of their businesses as a technology problem, and it's not. So making sure that people are thinking about how the technology will support the processes, but also making sure that those processes fit around the technology. So in terms of selecting those technologies, it's really about a strategic fit, thinking about ease of use of that platform. Ultimately, this has to be about reducing the cost of compliance for our customers. And then that starts to feed into elements of over complex solutions requiring too many, let's say, developers to support it, thinking about it, focusing on the business problem, and ultimately selecting technologies and vendors who will have that right strategic fit.
Great, thanks for those final wrap up there. Yeah, so thanks very much, Jack and Paul. We're a little bit over time, but I think it was worth continuing the conversation. It's been a really useful discussion with some interesting points being raised across all of the questions that we've covered. Some great insights as to the role of technologies to prepare and propel controls transformation within UK businesses. Yeah, we're out of time now. We covered the one question that popped up on the chat, so that's great also. So there's no outstanding questions either. In terms of, just very quickly, remind everyone of the remaining webinar in the series, which we scheduled for tomorrow. I'll be joined by Julianne McGarry, a senior lecturer from Birmingham City University, who specialises in the area of internal controls, risk and internal audit. So she'll be providing her valuable thoughts and guidance on the practical steps you can take to start preparing for a more formal approach to managing and monitoring your internal controls. So I'm looking forward to that one, and you can sign up for it right up until the day. And yeah, thank you once again, Jack and Paul, for sharing your valuable thoughts. I'm sure many of the listeners are going to get a lot of value from the things being discussed today. As I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to access the webinar on demand shortly via our website, so keep your eyes out for that. And if you'd like to discuss any of the content covered today in further detail, then please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Jack or Paul. And yeah, we can provide some contact details there as well. So thanks very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.